about it. So firstly, if you have a mobile phone, could you turn it to silent? But we do ask that you keep your mobile phone with you because we'll be needing it later in the session. As we're simulating a public meeting, it would be great if you could leave your cameras on, if you're comfortable with that, so we can see each other, and try and make your lighting so we can see you. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pleased to be seeing some other human faces after being in isolation for a little while.
Human?
Hello, welcome. Councillor Alistair Christie has joined us. Now, in saying about what I've just said, you are on film. So if you do need to get up to take a bathroom break or something, feel free to turn your camera off because it can be distracting. And I don't want anyone to become YouTube famous today, like the poor girl on the internet that took her phone with her or her computer when she went to the bathroom while on a Zoom call. We don't want any of that. We do ask today, everyone will be muted besides the speaker. So if you are not on mute yet, please mute yourself. So I'm just going to assume that you're all laughing at my hilarious jokes while I continue. If you are asked to speak, please unmute yourself, which you can do so down the bottom. If you hover your mouse down the bottom of your menu and move the mouse to where there's a microphone button, you can click that to mute yourself or unmute yourself. Also, another little tip is on the top right-hand side corner of your screen, you have an option of changing your view from, you can change it from a gallery view or to highlight the speaker. It may look a little bit different as well when we've got the presentation up. Another little tip is if you have a screen name displaying that's not yours, it may be a number, or in Des's case, his wife's name. If you want to change it, you can do that by hovering over your picture and clicking the three little dots and clicking the rename button, and you can type your name in. Just later when we're referring to people asking questions, it'd be nice to call you by your correct name. Now, if we have any technical difficulties today and you get disconnected, please be patient and try and re-enter the meeting, and our meeting organiser will try and readmit you as soon as possible. I'll just get you to flick to the next slide, please. Slide, Gary. Thank you. So the format today, the very long-winded intro by myself. We'll be shortly having a welcome from Mayor Glenn Rowlands. Then we'll have a presentation of the budget by Council's Chief Financial Officer, Gary Lewis, some discussion by some of our other general managers on the major projects that are proposed. We'll be asking you to text us any questions today, and then we'll raise them in a question and answer session. We'll then be seeking your feedback on a question we're going to pose to you. And then at the end of the session, if time permits, we'll be having a question and answer and a discussion session. Now, this is the bit where you need your mobile phone. If you've got your phone with you, can you please take a moment to pop this number that's on the screen in your phone, the one that's there in red. So that's 0437 018 916. Now, anytime during today's session, you can text us a question. Why we're doing this is the fact that all those text messages are going straight into our Your Say Yankalilla website, into the forum. So we're going to attempt to address them today, but if we do run out of time over the next few days, we'll work towards responding to them. By texting as well, everything is documented and goes onto that Your Say site so everyone can see it. And like I said before, at the end of the session, we will be asking you an important question, which we will be asking you to text your response as well. Now, if you're unable to have a mobile phone with the text facility, you are welcome to send us an email to our consultation@yankalilla.sa.gov.au address, and we will display that on the slides at the end. Each slide throughout the presentation does have this mobile number down the bottom, as well as the address. Now, you can also see down there at the bottom of the screen, there's a link. I don't think you'll be able to click on it, but if you type into your computer, or just go to our Your Say Yankalilla site and click on the annual business plan and budget, and then go to our discussion forum, you can actually view any of the questions or feedback people are texting in throughout this meeting. So feel free to do that as well. And of course, if you don't want to supply your feedback today through text or email, we welcome written submissions anytime or joining our Your Say forum, which will be open until the 31st of May. So I encourage everyone today to take this opportunity to listen and learn from others in the room, to listen, learn, explore. There may be some ideas or opinions that are different to yours. We can all, I'd like us all to agree to be respectful to one another. Now, feel free to give me a nod of agreement, or if you'd like to test out your Zoom reaction button down the bottom of your screen, when you slide your mouse down, there's a little button that says reactions, and there's a hand question. Later in the session, when we have an opportunity for questions, you can also use that feature. I think we all can agree with the pandemic going on at the moment. We need some kindness in this world, so we do ask that you be respectful and kind tonight. I will also remind you that all the text messages or emails that come through are filtered automatically, so anything with profanity or that name individual staff members will be removed. So please keep your comments respectful, as I know you will. Now, finally, we'll be finishing by 5 o'clock, and as you will see in the upcoming budget presentation, there's no budget for staff overtime, so let me assure you, we'll be done by 5. So with all those little tips I've given you, I'd like to now hand over to Mayor Glenn Rowlands to welcome and start the formalities.
Well done, Tash, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the District Council's draft business and budget presentation. In these unprecedented times, we all are having to make adjustments to the way we do things, and instead of travelling roadshow to meet you, and here we are via technology, and some of us are a bit clumsy with it, some have got very comfortable with it. There are many advantages of technology, but boy, I miss the face-to-face interaction with you all. This year's budget process started like any previously November, December staff asked to bring their budget requirements and put it together with community feedback and suggestions. Oh boy, what a change we had in February and March.
Right? Your face is not on there, but if you want to, you can. No, how do I get that? What do you mean? Louder.
I'll leave it up to you to hear the presentation, but we need to know that your thoughts are what your thoughts are, and we have to provide for those who are in business, and they're badly affected by the COVID-19 shutdown. Those who also are having financial difficulties, and we need to keep a close eye on that as well. This has probably been the most difficult budget I've had to deliberate over in my 6 years on council, for a whole lot of reasons, and not only the way the COVID has actually been, but also that we've reached a stage in our council time on council, that we're looking to do some fairly substantial projects, and they are in the budget, and Gary will go through those as well. The Chief Executive has had one grant funding application rejected, and in the process of trying to raise money for the community hub library, and he's now applied for another one. So what you are actually seeing in the budget that Gary's about to present is worst case. So we have not allowed for any government funding, and we understand that there are a lot of people out there that want things and some who don't. So we're really asking you in this consultation to come back to us with what you actually do want. And we'll then have to deliberate over these to make that decision at the end. So it's back to the 9 of us to make those decisions. So see how you go. Gary, I'll hand over to you, and we'll see what the questions are at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you for the introduction and setting the theme. So before we get stuck into the conversation around next year's budget, we thought we should catch up a little bit on where council is at the moment. A lot of things have changed with COVID-19 and the coronavirus. As I think a lot of people on this presentation will be aware that the council's main offices have been closed. A significant number of staff have been working from home where necessary, but generally we're offering most of the services that we've always offered face-to-face meetings aren't happening, so the library's had to be closed, but mostly we've been doing a lot of video meetings similar to this. Council meetings have been conducted on Zoom, and I think most of my colleagues would share my opinion that this has worked surprisingly smoothly. Our depot has continued to operate almost as normal, but they've changed their operating procedures to maximise social distancing. But they're basically operating at 100% capacity. There's nothing that they've stopped doing. One of the big changes that we're seeing is one of the big changes we've seen is that our caravan park has had to be closed. This has been a challenge, and we mentioned it later on in the presentation. I think you'll understand that when we were pulling the budget together 6 weeks ago, or 2 months ago, 3 weeks ago, the outlook was very different, and we didn't know what was going to happen, but we feared that the caravan park would be closed for the whole year. Things are looking a lot better than now, though. So we'll push on through the presentation, and we'll talk budgets now. So I think for those of you who attended last year, you'll have seen a slide very similar to this. And these are the core levers, the things that we can change in the budget. We control revenue, we control the level of projects we do, we can change the level of service, and what comes out of all those different factors is how much money we borrow, or how much we reduce our loans by. These are the same things every year, they don't change. There is no magic solution to the challenges of finding the money to do all the things that we would love to do. It is, let me just go to the next slide. Every year's budget is a balancing act. We talk about increasing rates, decreasing rates, service levels, projects. This part never develops. It never improves, because it's this constant factor that we would love to cut rates and increase services. We would love to run lots of projects and not have to borrow any money, but that's not the world we live in. What we do is we balance based on the information we have and the feedback we get. And today's processes, the feedback that we can collect from you today through whatever method, whether you raise questions now or you send messages through to You'll Say Yankalilla or however, those are the key things that we need at this point to get this balance right. So, Council's response to the current situation with the virus and our response to the virus, we are expecting there to be a significant recession. People are hurting, and we're aware that this could be a major global economic event. So what we've looked to do is we're cutting our costs. Operational cost cutting has included reducing staff levels. The executive pay is being frozen. We've removed overtime budgets, and a lot of our operating budgets have been reduced. The graph to the right shows the main movers. On the furthest left, we show a small increase in rates, which we'll talk about later on. There's a slight increase in user charges, income. Grants are similar. Employee costs are cutting by about 2.5%, and we're looking to cut our materials contracts and other expenses by over 10% based on compared to our current budget. To do this has been very challenging, but we believe that we've written a budget that we can deliver for next year, although there are challenges in doing that. What we've endeavoured to do in the budget is to keep funding for the big key strategic projects that we've been told the community is looking for. We're trying to keep the council's operational capability still there. We don't want to lose the ability to raise the service level in future years. We're targeting trying to keep the service level as close to its level in this year and previous years. We don't want to lose that. So we're trying to drive this through increased efficiencies as much as possible. So one of the key ways that we found efficiencies in this year's budget and in previous years is through shared services and collaboration with other local governments primarily. This has worked very well in the past. It's enabled us to solve some of the economies of scale that we struggle to find. And a lot of the efficiencies that underpin this year's budget and this year's cost-cutting exercises have been based on shared services. We have been working on this probably since before I was at Yankalilla, and we've pushed it further and further. Going further with shared services to find the additional savings in future years is probably going to get more and more challenging, and we are looking at how we do that. One of our restrictions there is now IT infrastructure, and we're trying to assess how far we can get with what we've currently got. But finding efficiencies in shared services is still a key area to look at. So if we get into some of the detail on the budget for this year, on the left-hand side table, we show the high level of the budget. The left-hand column is the budget for next year. The column to the side of that, to the right of that, is our current operating budget for this year, for 1920. So if we look at the budget for next year, we're talking an operational revenue of 13.59 million, which is a small increase on the current year's budget, and an operating expense budget which is significantly reduced. We're taking about $600,000 out of our current operating expenditure. So we're bringing our deficit down from the current year of $890,000 deficit. We're reducing that to $176,000. This includes bringing forward projects and efficiencies that we were expecting to achieve over the coming next 2 to 3 or 4 years, and we are bringing those into the following year, into 1920, as fast as we can. That will leave us with a deficit of $176,000 in the budget for next year. On the right-hand side of the slide, we're just looking at some comparisons over the years. The first year, 1920, is a large deficit, which is unavoidable. We reduced that deficit very significantly, and we're expecting to be close to break even by 21-22. And then from financial year 22-23 onwards, we believe that we can actually get into surplus. And that's an important step for us, an important goal. Subsequent to the sale of our CWMS operations, we have been in deficit last year, and that was a big change for council, and we're still working our way around remodeling, and that's a lot of what we've been doing for this budget. So one of the questions we tend to get every year is, in the budget we talk about capital expenditure and operational expenditure, and we talk about them quite differently. So we thought we'd put in a slide just to give a bit of a background on the differences between them, so there's going to be some clarity on that. From an accounting point of view, I don't want to bore you too much, but from an accounting point of view, when we build a capital asset, it's not really an expense. It's basically we turn one asset into another. We turn a finance cash asset into a building asset. So this is like if you build an extension to your house or you renovate your house. Once you've finished paying out the money, you're left with an asset which you use in the future. And this is capital expenditure. The alternative is the operational expenditure. And this is basically the cost of utilities or waste management. It's basically the same in your household budget as, you know, paying for dinner, paying for the lighting. Once you paid for it, it's gone, and you have nothing to show for it. So the way we fund capital expenditure and operating expenditure, it's similar but also slightly different. For assets that we already own, which have been built in the past, this would be the civic centre, the roads, the library, the bridges that we have. The money to fund those, to fund the rebuild of them, comes from the core operating budget. Sorry, just having a quick look at the chat messages. Every year, we spend money on renewing our capital infrastructure. And this is, every year, effectively, those assets lose value. They degrade in value because they're used, cars run over bridges, the weather hits the roads, and they need to have some money spent on them to keep them up to scratch. That money is part of the operating income. In the operating accounts, we refer to depreciation, and that amount of depreciation effectively earmarks the amount of money we have to spend rebuilding our assets. So when we talk about maintaining our existing assets and renewal capital expenditure, we don't borrow money to do that. As long as our operating statement is a break even or running a surplus, there's no requirement to borrow money to maintain our assets. And that's why we ring fence renewal capital expenditure and show it separately. It's basically, it's funded through rates and the other sources of income we have, whether they be grants or the caravan park. So we go on to the next slide. We move on to the emotive subject of debt, which we will talk about a little bit throughout a lot of the rest of the presentation. People talk about the idea of good debt versus bad debt, and it's always subjective. People have different opinions, but broadly speaking, we look at good debt as being an investment that will pay a return for a commercial enterprise, or maybe in your personal life. If you invest money to buy an asset which is going to earn you income in the future, that makes sense. Financially, that's a valuable asset. It's a good debt to have. You borrow money, you buy something which will repay that debt for you. When we talk about bad debt is normally considered to be money that's borrowed to pay for consumption. If you need to go out on Friday night and have a few beers and you don't actually have any money left, you borrow the money to do it, that's pretty much definitely bad debt. But it's difficult when you come to government debt, because a lot of the things government does doesn't pay a financial return. A lot of what we do in terms of roads, community centres, bridges, civic centres, whatever it is, that money pays a return to the community. And it's of great value to the community, but it doesn't pay any money to council. In the greater scheme of things, obviously, it's very, very important for our economy that we build those roads and bridges and we maintain them. Unfortunately, this means when we build big community assets, the source of funds for them is going to be rates, ultimately, or the grants or whatever. And so when we build new community assets, that does increase pressure on rates in the future. That said, though, some of our assets do pay financial returns. So just go on, talk a little bit further about debt. Generally, we borrow money to build new assets. When we're our normal operations and the renewal of our existing assets is paid for through rates and other operating income. But when we build new assets, that generally requires debt to fund them. There's an alternative approach where you could save money. We could try to put money away every year for many years to save several millions of dollars to build whatever it is we're building. But there is a problem with doing that. And that comes to the idea of intergenerational equity, the idea of user pays. So we just put an example here. I don't want to go into too many numbers or too many accounting or finance things, but just bear with me on this and we'll try and set an example to show why using debt is a good idea, potentially, when you're building new assets. In this example on the screen, we talk about building a $1 million asset. It doesn't matter what it is. It's an asset that the community is going to use. This asset, we say, for argument's sake, is a 10-year life. Now, the blue line on the screen that starts up on the left and slopes down to the right, this is just measuring the value of that asset. We're saying if it's got a 10-year life, it's going to start at $1 million, and after 10 years, it's worthless. In accounting terms, we say we'll depreciate the value of that asset $100,000 every year, just representing the loss of value of the asset. We will raise income through our rates and use charges and whatever to cover the cost of that depreciation every year. And that $100,000 we raise in cash can be used to repay the loan on this asset. Alternatively, it might be used to maintain that asset's value and extend its life. And what this means is that over the 10 years of the life of the asset, each year that that asset is used, the ratepayers and the users of that asset pay for it. They pay for it in the year that it's used, not before it's used. And this is referred to as intergenerational equity. The right people are paying for it, but the same people use it. It's the same idea as user pays. So we've gone into a little bit about our rates. Always a big topic for a budget meeting. So a little bit of history. Over the last 5 years, we have been working hard to reduce the rate at which rates have increased. So I'm using the word rates too many times. We're reducing the level at which we increase these rates. Back in 15-16, we had rate rises of 4%. We cut it to 3%. It's come down. And this year, we're proposing a rate rise of exactly 1/2 of CPI. That's 1.05%. We looked a little bit over the history of this, and that's what we're showing on the screen. When we're setting rates, we don't know what inflation is going to be. We use the latest CPI or inflation figures available to us to make an estimate of what it will be. We don't do any fancy modelling or have a lot of economic data behind us. It's a very simple estimate. And we believe that in the last few years that we've actually put rates up by less than CPI across the last 5 years. It's a matter of opinion, but we certainly haven't increased our rates much above CPI. And we certainly believe that we've actually kept our rates reasonably low in the last 5 years period. In that 5-year period, we've also, well, last year, basically, we cut $2 million from our income with the transfer of CWMS to SA Water. I know that $2 million didn't equate to a $2 million saving for all our ratepayers, but you know, when we crunch numbers with SA Water, we came to the conclusion that our ratepayer base is saving about $700,000. So we like to think that we did cut people's rates in there. When we come to this year, we're saying, as I said, a 1.05% increase in rates is what's being proposed at this point. And that's what we're looking for feedback on from you. The reason why we haven't gone with a lower rate of increase in these very difficult times is we've got to have an eye on our future financial sustainability. And with a history of keeping our rates over the last 5 years level or below CPI, we are challenged. We're very strongly challenged not to increase rates by more. We'll look at a little bit of detail of where our expense, of how our budget comes together. Again, if you've attended these meetings in previous years, you may be familiar with some of these slides. And that's because our budgets are pretty similar year on year. The operating income is overwhelmingly from rates. 82% of our income is from rates. After that, yeah, we get about 9% from user charges. That's basically from the Caravan park. and then we get 6% from grants from state or federal government generally. The other sources of income are small. They're important, but they're really not material. And you'll also understand when we were considering this budget and looking at a caravan park, 9% of our income came from it. We were worried, and it was a challenge to work through how we're going to handle that. If we look at our operating expenses, this mix of what percentage is contributed by what area is very, very similar year on year. Our employee costs represent 38% of our total costs. Our materials contracts are 37%, depreciation 22%, and finance costs 3%. These are constant, broadly constant year on year, and we do not expect them to change in the near future. I've mentioned the caravan park a number of times, and yeah, there's a lot been going on down there, and we've got news on that recently. Things have changed, but I'd like to hand over to our Chief Operating Officer, Andy Baker, who'll talk a little bit about how the caravan park is proceeding at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. You can have a bit of a breather now. Yeah, the caravan park's been through a bit of a turmoil in the last few weeks. It's been closed since March to the general public. We've been busy doing lots of uplift in the park while we've had the opportunity to move around quite freely. The budget assumes, this year's budget assumes that it's business as usual. But as we know, the future is definitely uncertain with this COVID or whatever we call it, 19 virus that's fallen upon us. Whatever next is around the corner may well be something similar that just hits us left field. So the future with whatever we do, certainly the caravan park is uncertain. Some of our costs in that park are unavoidable, and they're costs of people in particular, and also costs of power to making sure that things are running properly and we keep it up to spec while people aren't there. So there is costs that are unavoidable. If it remains closed, that contribution of 350k is likely not to be there. Some of the costs will be though, but saying that, now I've requested that it's open on Monday coming. Hopefully we can claw back some of that loss that we've had over the last 6 to 8 weeks, and we can start to look to the future. It will be different. There will be certain restrictions put in place about the caravan park and what we can and can't do. That's dictated to us through SA Health and state government in particular. But we're also taking the lead on not only our staff, but our patrons that use that park.
I'll just go on to the next slide, which I think Andy talked a little at the start of it, just the first few, I think, and then the general manager community will step in.
Yeah, that's me, Gary. Thank you. Yeah, so I'll just have a quick run through about the operating projects. You'll see on there's a planned bridge maintenance project. There are 2 bridges at the moment, and that is to undertake bridge maintenance work identified through our bridge inspection report. Maiponga Beach Bridge, which is a heritage bridge, which people may know or may not know. It's the bridge that divides both sides of Maiponga Beach. We'll be doing a load assessment testing on that, and there's some structural work that needs doing as well. And there's also the Jetty Road Caravan Park bridges. There's 2 bridges there. There's a footbridge and there's a road bridge, and they're both going to be looked at through load assessments as well, because we have quite large vehicles that move on and across those bridges. The water main investigations, they're there to investigate the current depths of the water infrastructure in our township roads. That's to determine the viability of whether we will or will not be having issues if we come to seal those roads and do that road sealing program. Rapid Bay, Second Valley treatment works. We currently run 2 treatment works, even though SA Water have taken over the large chunk of our major township works. We've still got 2, Rapid Bay and Second Valley, and both of those will require maintenance this coming year. We've also got the place-based inspection maintenance program, and that money set aside to introduce a formal preventative maintenance program and engage some external audits on behalf of the council for the place-based areas. We've got 13. Well, we look after 13, although we don't own the majority of those. We only own a few of them. Normanville Foreshore Master Plan, we're starting to begin that modelling and that master plan build. So you'll start to see a lot more activity ramping up around that Foreshore Master Plan into next year.
And if I can bring in Gemma Russell, the General Manager, to just briefly go through the other ones.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks, Andy, as well. A few of my projects here, we've got the Arts and Cultural Officer. This is to continue the partnership with Country Arts SA and the City of Victor Harbor for an arts officer. You may have met her, called Peta. She will work for the district for the equivalent of 2 days per week, continuing her to chair the Arts and Cultural Committee, running art displays and working with the Flurrier Festival on other projects within the district. The community grant of $100,000 is slightly different this year. In previous years, council has allocated set funding to Maiponga Community Centre and the Yankalilla Memorial Park of $25,000 each. Also, the New Year's Eve pageant of $10,000 and the Flurrier Festival, $30,000 biannually. Funds were also allocated to community grants, initiatives for events and items, and individual grants to support youth. With the COVID-19 pandemic, there may be restrictions still in place that will impact on the community group facilities and any events that are run. Therefore, rather than allocating blanket funding, it's proposed that a pool of grant funding is made available to clubs, event organisers and individuals to apply to council throughout the year for distribution. If this gets through the process, a new policy and guideline will be created about that. The Early Childhood and STEM project, this is with the library. Storytime was introduced in the library back in November 2017 to support early childhood literacy. Also, the STEM, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering and Maths Initiative, began in 2016, and with the Little Bang Discovery Club, etc. These programs we wish to continue working with the local school, reception classes at the Yankalilla Area School, as well as other members of the community. The What's Up project. This is a project that consists of several small projects showing council as a leader and a supporter of the state government in reducing and banning the use of single-use plastics, and promoting and educating and encouraging the community to introduce compostable replacement projects. This is currently a group that is set up of staff, the NNRC, or the Normanville Natural Resource Centre, and elected members. The last project I got here is the on-demand transport, and this is an alternative to the community bus service that we've used in the past, which was a bus service that ran 1 day per week. This option utilises our current CHISP vehicles, providing an on-demand service Monday to Friday through a combination of client pays and the budget allocated to that project.
Okay, thank you very much. We're just going to move on to our next set of projects. These are our renewal capital expenditure, the asset management projects, which I will hand back to Andy again.
Yeah, the majority of those are mine, Gary. Yeah, the first one, bridge replacements. That's for design of the replacement for a bridge at Blockers at Maiponga, and one at Blacker Road, which is off Salt Creek Road, as part of the council's bridge maintenance program that we've now set up. We've also got a fleet major plant renewal. There's 2 heavy trucks that are in need of renewal in there. Small vehicle fleet, that's 2 office vehicles that we'll be looking to replace this year. And then we move into the sealed roads renewal. The reconstruction of sealed roads, reconstructions and reseals of the township roads. These will incorporate Heathcote Street in Normanville, which is a construction of curb and gutter, stormwater infrastructure and pavement seal. Chemist Street in Normanville to look at the construction in curb and gutter, stormwater infrastructure and pavement seal there. St Andrews Boulevard in Normanville. There's a section near the Links Clubhouse that's in need of repair of pavement failures, and we'll reseal that with some hot mix asphalt. Dump Road, which if you've been up to the waste and recycling depot, there's the pavement up there is starting to fail quite a bit, and so we're going to put some money aside to repair that with probably a spray seal. O'Connor Street in Normanville is going to get a reseal in spray seal. Marjorie Street's the same, and Hay Flat Road, there's a portion of Hay Flat that the bitumen will be repaired with another reseal of spray seal there. Reconstruction and resealing the rural area, we've got Blockers Road in Myponga. There's a first section there that needs to be spray sealed. Causeway Road, the entire length of Causeway Road. Chemisill Road is another one, 3.5 kilometres from Wenhams to Stockhill. Marion Road will be looked at as well, about 0.5 kilometre there, just off Chemisill Road to the end. Rakang Road, there's again just over 1 kilometre on Rakang. Tapanapa Road, 1.5 kilometres right up to 690 to the cattle yards. We've got Hay Flat Road again. There's a 1.2 kilometre section next to Range Road that's going to be looked at. Sampson Road, Blockers Road and Tunkalilla Road, all parts of those roads and sections of the roads will be looked at. The IT one is yours, I believe, Gary.
Yes, the IT and fixtures and fittings maintenance, that's a very boring project. We basically have a small budget set aside for to allow things that fail. This is where we have equipment that fails and we have to replace. We endeavour not to spend it, because if we cannot spend it, that's great. We move on to the following slide, which I think is back to Andy once again. These are the new projects. And now some of these will be talked about, I think particularly the library we'll talk about later on. But we'll leave the other ones for Andy to have a quick chat about now.
Yep, so you've got 5 on there, 5 or 6 in total. You've got the construction of a new culvert in accordance with our stormwater master plan and asset management plan in Finnisvale Drive. Main South Road, which is the portion opposite the main school from the garden centre to the childcare centre, that will be, the footpath will be hot mixed through. Rapid Bay Bridge, finally we're at a construction phase for Rapid Bay Bridge, so the people at the school will be really happy the fact that we're actually looking at constructing that bridge, which has been in abeyance now for quite some time. Also, we've got the designs that are now coming up for 2 particular places. One is Forktree Road, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well, and also for Grundy Court. There's a redesign project to look at resealing and upgrading Grundy Court in Second Valley. The Second Valley car park area, which is the area that sits outside of the Second Valley Hall. This is to follow on the design work that we had done earlier on in 2019, and this is now to construct some new curbs and gutters outside that hall and to give it that delineation instead of people just pulling straight off the main road and into what could be a disaster situation there. And the last but not least is Willis, Martin and Jervois. Again, it's another project that we've been speaking about for a while, and this is stage 1 of that concept design for drainage and road sealing, so we can get that on the map and running.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy. I'm sure people may have some questions on that later on, but moving on to the next slide. So we also we talk about keeping the big projects going whilst we're cutting our costs, and we want to show some of our strategic projects that are going to span more than 1 year. So if we look at this, in 2021, we are looking at starting the new library that's been talked about. There's some money going into the ceiling of Forktree Road. It's not so much this year, but the following year there's a much bigger grant. When we move on into the following year, in 21-22, the projects that we're talking about now will still be running. We anticipate that more than half the expenditure on the library on that project will happen in 21-22. The Surf Life Saving Club, which we'll talk about a bit later on, that expenditure we expect to kick in 21-22 with that project. The ceiling of Forktree Road will push on into 21-22. And there's also what we're calling the unidentified stimulus package, which could be 21-22. We also, on this slide, we're just highlighting that the Surf Life Saving Club is not actually a $1.1 million project. It's probably a $3.5 million project. But council has been asked to contribute 1.1 million. We talk about that project in a couple of slides' time. The one project we don't cover later on in this slideshow is the unidentified stimulus package. So I thought I'd like to explain what that is. In the response at a federal government level and following out at the state government level as well, there's an encouragement to launch major projects which will act as a stimulus to the economy. This is the federal government's response to the coronavirus driven recession that we're expecting. They want money to be spent on major projects. Federal government doesn't know what those projects are, but they also know that local government probably does. We are connected very closely with our community, and we hear from our community on days like this in particular. And so we may well be in a position to receive funding from a federal government or state government level as part of these initiatives. But we don't know the details of what those initiatives are going to look like. The reason why we're putting money in our budget for 21-22 is we want to say that we factored in the possibility of funding for other projects. And this would help us win those grants if they become available. But at the moment, we don't actually know what that project would be. It could be something, if the community consultation on the service station site says we want to build something for the community or a tourist infrastructure, that might be something that would look for a funding from federal government in here, or Myponga Hall, or Stone Road, whatever it is. There are many things out there that we would like to do, but we don't have the funding to do it. And part of laying a foundation for being able to apply and win one of those grants could be having money allocated in our budget. We've provisionally said it's a 21-22 expenditure, so not next year, the year after. But we don't know. It could be sooner than that, it could be later than that, and it might not happen as well. Whatever happens with that, this will be coming back to council, and there will be community consultation on it. We're just putting it here as a place marker for something that might happen, and it might be in our interests to have it there at this point in time. I know that's vague. I really wish we could give you some more solid information around it, but we really don't know. I'm going to push on, and we're going to talk about some of those key projects. And this one in particular, the first one we're going to look at is the library project, for which I will go back to my colleague Gemma, if you're ready.
Hi. Yes, thank you very much. Thanks, Gary. With regards to the library, if you could get to the library slide, please.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. No worries. While you're doing that, just the Community Library Action Group, or known as CLAG, they were formed, and they work with council members and staff to determine where the permanent position of the library should be located and the size of that library. An extension to this centre of 500 square metres has been approved in principle by council. Draft plans were provided by the group, and costings were undertaken for the build of that building and the roadway. The costings include the fittings for the library, and as I mentioned, the roadway, that's resurfacing stormwater and lighting on that area. The centre will be used for many community activities, including youth with support from the Yankalilla Lions Club. A new building will enable the library to continue its significant upward trend and demand for its services. And that includes not only loan facilities, but free PC, free personal computers, Wi-Fi use, Wi-Fi printing, room hires, local history, and programs, for example, the school holiday activities and story time. Not to forget the home library services and providing a place to be. Next slide, please, Gary. The cost for the library project is $2.2 million over 2 years. And to assist council, we've applied for grant funding. The first grant funding was with the Open Spaces and Places for People, and we put in a grant submission for 1.6 million. Unfortunately, we were not successful with that grant. We only found out about it earlier this week, and we should get some feedback on why we were unsuccessful in due course. Another grant which we've just submitted an application for is for the Regional Growth Fund, and that's for 50% of the project for the building alone. So we put in a grant application for 883,000, and we're waiting to hear if we're successful with that. Hopefully before November we should hear.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I think Andy will step in to talk a little bit about the Surf Lifesaving Club and where we're at with that.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Yeah, currently we're now considering 5 options. We did have 6 on the table, and one of those was rescinded as a motion last week when the councillors got together. So that's been taken off the table, and that's the one where it was going to go in the car park. That's been taken away. We've now got 5, and those 5, if you want to see where they are, they're in the minutes from the council meeting from last month. And once we've determined what options are viable, and we may well knock 1 of 2 of those 5 out, we'll then go and consult with the community on where those locations are likely to be. There's a lot of talk about which ones where they fit best, but we need to get everybody's view and not just a few.
I'm going to keep you talking, Andy. Forktree Road.
Yeah, I said I was going to come back to Forktree. Forktree, we're actually seeking funding through the Special Local Roads Programme to construct, which in effect is the last portion of unsealed road on Forktree. And that's the piece that's on the map that you can see on the right-hand side there from the Maiponga Main South Road right up to Reservoir Road. It's quirky. There's lots of twisty-turny bits in there, and the majority of the money is going to be to realign that road. We're looking at possibly moving portions of it to different locations, and that's going to come with its own challenges. Once it's completed, it's going to form the complete ring around, sealed ring around the Maiponga Reservoir, which is going to be quite interesting for the day trippers to come round if they're in their cars. Sealing this section will also provide a decrease in our maintenance costs. Our maintenance costs to just keep maintaining this portion of dirt road is quite considerable, and over time that sealing of that road, that maintenance cost will hopefully peter away. It's envisaged that this project will move over 2 years to complete. So the piece that's in this year's budget concentrates on the actual fundamentals of design and also land acquisition, etc., that goes with that. So should we look at that?
Okay, thank you. And yeah, we keep you talking, Andy. This is probably one of the more exciting and very visible projects that's on the go at the moment. So there you go. The township. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite topical now. So if anybody's been down there today, they've probably seen just that front wall of that building. It's now virtually to ground level, which in itself is quite exciting.
Again, consultation will occur on this site once everything's down, and I'll show you another slide after this one. Once everything's down and into a green space, consultation will then start with the general public to have a look at what would you like to do with this area. It's not necessarily going to stay like you can see on that picture there. It will be open to consultation onto what you would like to see as residents in that space. We're at the moment, we're going through the demolition. We've had asbestos removal, which took a little bit longer than we thought. There was more asbestos in the building than was first envisaged. That's now being removed carefully and disposed of. We're taking the building down now, which is, like I say, in the throes of the last components of that. Then the tanks will be extracted. And at the same time, we are doing testing on the soil underneath those tanks, because we can't get underneath until we get them out, to make sure there's been no leakage. And then we're all systems go to start leveling this out, put some irrigation in there, put some grass in there. That will likely now be done in springtime, when the grass is at its more peak growing period, rather than in the winter. So yeah, we've got a bit of time to have a look at what we're doing there and make sure that everything's safe and yeah, put away.
It's exciting times for the centre of Normanville. Big changes. Yeah, and quite a bit to do with the community there to decide where we're going. So we refer to this as a plan for uncertain times. Why it's a plan for uncertain times is that whilst we're focusing on delivering fundamentals, we're still building the assets we've been asked to build. We intend to deliver on all the key goals. We will be working on delivering the new strategic plan, which a lot of work has gone into. We're bringing forward a target to achieve break-even on our operating statement, which will ensure our future financial stability. We're also minimising our rate rise. Going at a rate rise of half of inflation is a big commitment, and there will be a lot of challenges for delivering that, but we've committed to that at this point. And yeah, obviously we'll be chasing a lot of grants for whatever's out there. On the right hand side of this slide, we show all our new projects that we envisage happening over the next 3 years. The only ones we're really talking about right now are the first years, the 2021 budgets, but some of those have expenses going into the following years, and it just shows that we have a significant commitment to plan to continue to push the boundaries of the service delivery and the assets. How do we do this? How can we achieve that? Well, we are going to borrow money to deliver these new assets. All this the new buildings will cost money, but we are fortunately in a strong position to start with. We're forecasting about 50% financial liability ratio. That's a measure of our debt for the end of this year. Relatively speaking, we're in a stronger position than most of our neighbours. Victor Harbour is slightly less than us, but Alexandrina, KI, and Onkaparinga will have significantly high levels of debt. The local government association recommends you keep your debt below 100%. So we're well within that at the moment. And being in this strong position now enables us to consider doing these big asset builds. The most important thing to ensure our long-term sustainability is that we can show that if we take on this debt, that we can manage it and we can repay it. And that's what we're talking about on this, which is my last slide. After this, I'll let you go. Debt is important to council. It enables us to operate effectively and to deliver projects. But we must be able to pay the interest costs on it, but also we need to show that we can repay it. And that's what running a balanced budget does. On this graph, we show a little bit of history on our left-hand side and a bit of the future. If you go back to 2010, 2011, council's debt peaked at about 140%. It was then brought down very, very quickly over a number of years, down to about 20% in 2015-16. Since then, that has risen modestly. Whether it's modest or modest, that's an opinion. In my opinion, it's a modest increase, whilst the council's been spending more money on its infrastructure assets and particularly on its roads. So we get to this year where we're predicting about a 50% level of debt at the end of the year. And with the projects that we are envisaging doing, when we look into our long-term financial planning, we believe debt will increase up to a peak of 94%. So we're not only concerned about that, because when we look at the modelling and we look at our forecasts, we find that we can repay that debt. Managing, following our asset management plans, making sure that we're fully funding the renewal of our existing assets. From about 5 years' time forward, we will actually be reducing our debt significantly, and we bring it down to 80% by 2029-30. So this decrease is important because it basically shows that we can be sustainable if we run these projects that are being considered. That is my last slide, and with that, I will hand back to Tash, who will take us through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Gary. And before I do hand over, I just have one question that I think is in particularly for you that's come through on the text line. I think it's referring to the slide where you were talking about the rate of councils' rates increasing. And the question was, does that graph showing rates versus inflation include property valuation of property changes? If not, it is very misleading.
The graph that showed rates is basically showing two things. Is CPI versus actual rate rise. It doesn't attempt to look at valuations, but the rate rise is not a percentage change. It's actually the amount of money people pay us, not a way it's calculated or a rate in the dollar. It's the amount of money pay us. So if we're saying that on average, CPI is gone up 3%, and in that year rates have gone up 2.8%, it means that on average people are paying us 2.8% more. The valuation of the property doesn't come into it, and it is still an accurate comparison.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so now I'll hand over. I'll be throwing some questions to the Mayor. If anyone has any questions, feel free to text them through to this number. Now, the first question that came through as we commenced, this one wasn't by text. I'm not sure if this person is in this forum or not. But the question was, I wonder whether the expenditure of $1 million on rebuilding the Surf Life Saving Club is good use of the district's rates revenue. I'm sure that existing structures can fulfil the requirements for surf rescue, and what other recreational sporting body in the district will be funded to such an extent?
Thank you for that. I'm not sure where to direct that, maybe to Nigel, but I will make a comment that the Surf Life Saving Club is going through a very stringent investigation. The commitment isn't there. A proposal has been put to us, and so as we go through the process, the consultation with the community might be resounding and give us a very good guide of where they want to actually go. As far as some other sporting bodies getting that sort of help, yes, I quite agree, and I feel quite the same way, because the Memorial has been working through a master plan for some time. Nigel, would you like to make any comment on that?
Thanks, Glenn. I think the comment is that they don't believe spending $1 million is on the surf club, and we encourage them to pass that forward and provide that in the feedback, and that's what the consultation process is all about. So send it in and we'll give it to the elected members.
Thank you. Further questions, Tash?
Sure. I'll just note that I've had some messages through from Gary, who put his name on the questions. They are in relation to the previous budget. So I did say at the start of the meeting, I will keep us on track. So I'm not going to ask them, but Gary, we will certainly get back to you on those. The next question that came in was, I understand that caravan parks in South Australia are allowed to open. Considering the contribution to the budget, What promotion is planned and how can we maximise income while restricting costs?
Yeah, very good. Could I put that to Andy?
Yeah, sure, Glenn. Yeah, I'll pick that up. We are trying to maximise as much as we possibly can. We know we've lost nearly 2 months now, but equally we have to adhere to the SA Health's guidelines and also state government's guidelines. It's a bit of a throwaway statement to say that we can open. Yes, we can, but there's lots and lots of restrictions that we have to actually adhere to. So it's not just a matter of going back 8 weeks and saying, right, let's kick off where we was. The whole landscape's changed. So we are trying to muddle our way through that landscape, whilst in the same process, trying to make as much revenue as we possibly can, and open as much as we possibly can in the caravan park.
Thanks, Andy. Actually, Gary, I've a question for you. Andy might pick it up as well. The COVID virus impact is actually in the 1920 financial year, which will impact on this financial year's income. What we're actually talking about is a 2021 budget. I'll go to Gary first. The impact of the loss of revenue this year, how will that impact 2021 budget?
There will be, we're changing, we will be updating our forecasts for the current year for 1920 to take into account all the impacts we're seeing. But we actually offset quite a lot of our, there's a negative in that. We lose over $100,000 worth of income, I believe, from the caravan site this year. But we've actually found offsetting savings in the current year. So we're not expecting our financial position at the end of the year to be worse than we were predicting. So for the current year 1920, when we update our budgets and forecasts, we're actually going to say we're looking at being a slightly stronger position by the end of this year, because we took some strong measures early on to cover the COVID emergency. So when we go into the 2021 year, which we're talking about the budget for, we're going to be in a very similar position to we expect it to be, or maybe very slightly better. Does that cover your question, Glenn?
Thank you. Yes, yes.
I think, Glenn, sorry, Glenn, just to cover off on that, because we're having to implement changes, we are forced to implement changes. It actually means that we're going to be cutting the amount of people that will be able to get in the caravan park. So that will have a knock-on effect next year, but we don't know what that's going to look like yet.
Well answered. Thank you. More questions, Tash?
All right. What is the the FTE budget for 2021?
Chief Executive?
The FTE count was before running at about 55. We're looking to run it at 53 next year.
Thank you. Another question?
The former Normanville SS service station, I'm guessing that is, development of 80K budget. May we have an update on the anticipated actual expenditure?
Tash, your mic is coming over very wobbly. I didn't quite get all that.
Like a Dalek.
Oh. I'll try again.
Let me take it. The question was, there was an $80,000 budget for the removal of the service station. Andy has talked about the service station earlier today. And how's that $80,000 looking? At the moment, we're still taking it down. We have been contacted from the EPA. A few members of the community talked to the EPA, and the EPA are talking to us at the moment on some additional tests. And that is the only thing that's been flagged at the moment that we may add to the 80,000. I'm happy to report exactly what those costs are in the future CEO report, but at the moment it's still reasonably on track, but subject to what these EPA requirements are going to be.
Thank you. Further questions?
All right, I'll try again. I'm sorry if you can't hear me. You acknowledge that ratepayers are hurting and we are heading into recession. Is it possible to reduce rates if major projects are put on hold? Now is not the time to increase debt or rates in order to fund major projects. How can the library rebuild and the Surf Life Saving Club investments be justified? Sorry, this is quite a long one. Where is the needs analyst that demonstrates what proportion of ratepayers will benefit from these projects? Why not ask ratepayers if they prefer a new library and Surf Life Saving, or or a 20% cut to rates next year? Not real hard to predict what the majority will endorse. The justification for putting these projects into the budget is questionable. Might help to attract unknown stimulus funding, ?
Thank you. Those questions will get answered a bit more officially, I think, Tash. But with that, that's why those things are in the budget, because it's been asked. They've been asked by the community, and this is the way the budget is looking if we go ahead with all of these. And it is worst case scenario. As we go out for consultation, it's very important that the community tell the elected members via have your say and these forums and things of how they feel. I've had some phone calls personally that there's a conservative approach. I've also had the phone calls and the emails to say this is the time to borrow money and move on and get things happening. So we elected members have got to do that balancing act that Gary showed before. So does any of the senior leaders or Nigel like to expand on that question, or leave it to get answered later?
I'm happy to add a little bit more. I think the question was also we didn't do the major project, could we cut rates by 20%? That doesn't really equal that, because what we're doing for the proposal for those projects is that you borrow the funds and then you spread that rate burden over the next 15 years. So I think that and Gary might jump in and save me here with the numbers, but for every $1 million of capital projects we don't do, what would be the effect on the rates for not doing that, Gary, I ask?
Well, the main expense is the interest expense, which is about, for $1 million, is about 0.2% of rates.
Okay.
So it's $20,000, $1 million, yeah, 0.2% of rates. And look, if we build those projects, it does put pressure on rates in the future, but not in the order of 10% or 20%. It'll put up rates potentially by 0.5% or 1%. That's a sort of long-term prognosis for those projects.
But I understand the feedback and keep flowing it through to the elected members and make sure that they've got some tough decisions to make come the June meeting.
Yeah, thanks for that comment, Nigel. They will be tough.
Yeah.
Further questions, Taz?
Yeah, the last one that's come through is from last year's budget, salary looked like exceeding the initial forecast by 225,000. This is despite claim savings of 280,000 in savings and efficiencies. How are these costs being reduced, and how can you ensure another blowout does not occur?
I think that one might be directed at me, Glenn.
I think it might be.
I think that salaries is one that does take approximately 33% of expenditure, so it is a major expense for council, so it's something that needs to be closely monitored. It is correct that the salary budget does appear as though it increased, but I think that salary budget also needs to be looked at in context of the overall budget. Sometimes it's better for us to pay for an additional amount in salary as opposed to getting contractors. So as the salaries may go up, the contractors go down. But as far as next year goes, we've been making some tough decisions on how the salary budget's made up. We just talked about the FTE count we'll be looking to be reducing. We're looking to reducing the amount of casuals, the amount of overtime, the exec salaries aren't going to be by the contract CPI amount. Yeah, I think it is my role to ensure that those salary figures stay under control. And I acknowledge that.
All right, thank you. What I might do, we will have some opportunity for more questions at the end, but I'm conscious that I really want to get everyone's feedback that is going to go into your say. So I'll just get Gary to flip to the next slide, please. So now this is where we get some details down, guys. If you have your mobile phones with you, I ask that you do text the mobile number below with an answer to this question. So the annual business plan and budget is a balancing act for council with the delivery of services and projects for the community and the rising of borrowing and rates to pay for them. So we'd like to know from you guys, have we got that balancing act right? And what adjustments, if any, need to be made? So if everyone could take some time to respond to that question via text message or email. If you don't want to do that now, that's fine. You can also go onto Your Say anytime or email us anytime. I'll give you some time to do that. We will be leaving this text line open until 5:30. So if you have some more text you want to send a bit more detail, you can. So Gary, would you like to go to the next slide? So this is the contact details as well. If you don't want to text, you can see the web address for our engagement website, which is Your Say Yankalilla, the email address, or of course you can post them to us if you like. And while everyone's responding to that, I'll get you to go to the next slide. So we are now through the formal bit of our presentation. So we'd like to move into, if anyone would like to verbally ask some questions. What I do want to note, you can see I've written on here that our elected members are here to listen today. Although we've asked you to text feedback or email it so it can be recorded into our website, we just want to make you aware that's our preference because the stuff you text will actually go into the report that you've written. Of course, they will hear what you verbally say, but we can't report that. So I do invite you, if you have any questions, to either put your hand up or use your emoji hand button. I do ask we keep it respectful and that everyone keeps their comment or question within a 3-minute time frame. So Gary, you can probably stop the screen sharing now, so then I can see everyone, I think. So is there anyone with a burning desire to ask a question or a comment? Yes, Rod Webber, are you raising your hand there?
I think Rod's just brushing his hair. I thought, Des, you had some questions earlier.
He needs to turn on his mic, please.
Let me do that.
Des,
Okay, I'm on.
that again, please.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just in regards to the service station, I'm just wondering, I know they're putting in a park as a temporary measure. I'm just thinking, you know, it's been often talked about where the retail area would expand in Normanville. And look, a few years ago there was talk about a town centre plan. I'm just wondering, has there anything sort of happened on that town centre plan? Because that, to me, would be the logical sort of way forward to work out what you're doing with the service station side. That's
yes.
one question. Do you want to address that one first?
Yes, Des, if I could note, there hasn't been a plan or anything progressed other than getting it down to an area
Sorry?
where
I can't hear you, Glenn.
it gets down to an area where it's green and we've got not getting it.
Not really.
Nigel?
Well, no.
Nigel, you'd like to?
Yep. Can you hear me, Des?
Yeah, I can hear that a lot clearer. Glenn's
Yep.
microphone maybe not close enough or not working properly.
I'm not sure. Des, with the surf club, as Andy was explaining, we're going to take it down to the base. We are going to be able to surf it a lot later in the year. We did miss the opportunity to make it green at the start of the year.
See that.
And then we'll go talk to the community on exactly what they want for the long-term plan. But that may include having a look at those plans that you're talking about for the town square.
Yeah, well, I think there was like, you know, there was I think it was part of the strategic planning years ago that you know, where is retail going to expand into? And you know, I mean, that would, to me, would be the logical site to expand retail. And now we're talking about a park, or maybe we could, you know, have some community infrastructure there, but it's in a retail precinct, and you wonder why you want to sort of have a park and community sort of facilities in a retail area when, you know, I just, you know, I get back to my question, you know, have we actually got a town centre plan or not?
To answer that, Des, no.
That's why it's going out to public consultation. That's why you need to put in public consultation. It's not, we don't make that decision, Des. That's what the public make. We're giving you a blank canvas to make a decision.
Yeah, I'm not just talking about the service station site itself. I'm actually talking about the whole of Normanville. You know, I mean, you've got to look at as a whole rather than just one block of land. You've got to look at the whole area there, the roads, the other retail shops that are there. You know, there's a lot to consider rather than just that one site. You know, that's what I see.
Yeah, Des, if I could, I guess in my next 2 years here on council, I don't see us revisiting that at this stage because there's other things that are in priority that we've actually engaged with the community on, and we've just said it's there. Have you got any ideas? Bring it forward, and we'll put it in the pot. But at this stage, I don't see this council having capacity to do any more than we've actually got on the go at the moment. But I agree, it would need to incorporate all those things.
Yeah.
Yes.
It does seem a little bit ad hoc to not look at the whole picture and just look at one little part. That's all.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. Totally agree.
Okay. Anyone else before I have the second question? Anyone else first?
You can go again, Des. We'll have a look at anyone's flagging something.
Okay. It's in regards to the library rebuild. Pretty big expenditure. I spoke to the committee that was sort of looking into the library, where it was going to be. I've made a few comments to the chair a few months ago. I'm not sure whether it was written into the report or anything, but I put in suggestion that the tourist office and the library should be incorporated into one. The reason for that is I don't think, you know, in the long term the council can support 3 separate office areas. You know, the library, the main council offices, and also the third lot of offices there at the tourist centre. You know, if you're going to have a major rebuild, why don't you incorporate the tourist office into that, which would reduce, you know, just down at least to 2 office areas or 2 areas and 2 lots of electricity bills. You know what I'm trying to say. You know, just try to combine a little bit rather than sort of spread yourself out over the whole district with 3 areas. That's just,
But I understand what you're saying. If I go back a few years when the chief executive of about 2003 or 4 put a program in front of us that Precinct 181 housed the new council chambers with a whole community centre. And yes, I can't remember the discussion. I wasn't all that far into council in those days, but what we ended up with is 3 different sections, and sadly to say, we'll probably have to stay that way.
Yeah, well, you've got to think of the longer term. I'm not talking about, you know, like next couple of years, but in the longer term, spending so much money for the library, why not just look at that? A bit of incorporating, you know, in together. I was very familiar with the council office rebuild a number of years ago. I actually come up with a plan to have a big facility there where the CFS and the emergency services area, that block of land that the council owns there, we could have a great area there. I actually drew up some plans, some concept plans. I was actually in the newspaper about it anyway. But yeah, but the trouble is it was already done. It was already too far. The plans were too far advanced when it came out for consultation. So we couldn't go back at that point. But would have been a great site, you know, would have brought everything. But anyway, we can't go back, but we can still, with this one, have a think about it. You know, we're very spread out. Think of the longer term.
Drop it in on your side, Des.
Yeah, okay.
That'd be good.
So anyone else before I...
Just hang on, I'll have a look.
There must be somebody else.
Anyone else got any questions? No, got another one, Des?
Yeah, so this the debt. I always worry about debt. Just trying to get some figures regarding the current debt. I know there's a lot of, you know, this financial sort of jargon, whatever they call it, you know, technical sort of stuff. I just wanted 6 basic figures. One was what our current debt is for this at the moment. You know, all the debt added up for 1920. What do we owe at this very point in time? Also, what is the projected debt for next year, 2021? And thirdly, projected debt for 21-22. So there's three simple debt numbers, and I was going to ask those, or I am asking those.
Yep. And
also for the same year, the incomes, because a lot of the budget is based on, well, the actual borrowings, and that is 94% coming down to 80%. Well, it didn't say in what time period, but from the graph, it looks like it's about 7 years. We'll get back down to 80%. But also like to see the income levels for at the moment. What's our total income? I know there's been a little bit of a decrease because of, you know, the Caravan Park. I understand that, but you know, what's our projected? It's only another month, you know, or so before the end of the financial year. So they must have a rough idea what our income has been for this year. Also projected for 2021 and the projected income for 2021 and 21-22. So the 6 figures, I think, is it sort of pretty clear on that?
Gary?
What I'm asking then?
Yep. How do you go, Gary? Just put your mic on, it'll be good, thank you.
Most of those figures are actually available in the annual business plan. Probably the best bet is actually drop you an email, Des, with that information, so you can actually have it a record of it, if that's okay.
Can you just give us an idea now? I mean, everyone might want to sort of, they've heard my question, they might want
Okay.
a bit of an answer, just an opportunity for everyone to sort of, being an open meeting, I think everyone might want to hear.
Des, thank you.
For this year is about 13, we're expecting 13.47 million.
13, sorry, I'll write that figure down. Sorry, that was for what?
Your income for this year
is
forecast at 13.47 million. Your income for the following year is 13.59 million.
Okay. And has it been projected any further than that or not?
You want further income? So then the year after that, I think we're going to 14.1 million.
So it goes up a little bit.
Correct.
Yeah.
And now the Gary?
Do you have the debt levels there or not? Do we have those?
Hang on, Des.
So we're forecasting currently for this year to have 6.3 million in debt.
How much?
Now, when we say debt, what I'm saying is actual borrowings at the bank. Because that's what the question you seem to be asking me. You're not asking me net financial liability.
Well, I'm asking the actual debt levels, not so much what we're going to borrow, but how much will we in debt?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that the question you're asking is how much we borrow from the bank at a point in time. The figures for net financial liabilities are reported there. Okay, I don't actually understand the question.
So what? The debt's what debt's at the bank.
Yeah.
Des?
Yeah, the debt at the bank. The amount of money we borrow straight from the bank at the moment is about 6.3 million.
Yes.
And then we expect that to rise to about 7.5 million.
Yes.
And then that will rise again, I think by another 2 million. Yeah. I don't actually have that figure right in front of me, sorry.
But another 2.
I believe it goes up by 2 million at that point. I can drop you that figure.
Maybe 9.5 approximately.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, okay, just gives us a bit of an idea.
So what that's actually saying, Des, is that if we do the projects as per the budget at worst case, that is what the approximate worst case would be.
Just based on those figures, it looks like we're going to have approximately a 50% increase in debt.
Well, we're forecasting our debt going up from 63% to 94% of income. So yes, that's about a 50% increase in our level of debt.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I was pretty good at maths at school, so.
One way I like to look at it is if you had a household that was earning $100,000, it would be like they'd have a mortgage of $63,000, because that would be a debt ratio of about 63%, up to still earning $100,000 but having a mortgage of $95,000. So it's very in control. And while having an asset base of worth about 800,000, like 8 times your debt. So the debt level does get up, but you'll see that the graph that we've put together brings it right back down again to a manageable level. And it goes nowhere near the levels that was achieved when rebuilding the council chambers. So, but we also understand that debt is a concern and it's something that we need to stay on top of.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I did see the debt graph there, and it looked like it was about 2027. Went up a little bit and then down and then up and then sort of went straight lined a little bit, and it looked like about 2027 before that debt goes down. So we've got a sort of another 7 years at that sort of 9.5 level. So it's sort of pretty high. And then also, I mean,
fall after 5 years.
Sorry.
It starts to fall after 5 years.
Only very I noticed the graph was a very gradual. Even after 5 years, it's gradually down, and then gradually, and then after 10 years, it starts to drop a little bit after that. But yeah, I think we're going to have to hold this debt for quite a while. That's what I'm.
I'd love to see my mortgage drop at those levels.
At worst case scenario, Des.
Yeah, and I mean, this 94%. This is your debt to income ratio. You know, 94. I know 100. They say under 100% is okay, but isn't that the sort of the level that it's no good? Like about 100%. The LGA says 100%. Anything below 100% is okay, but when you get up to 94, you know, you're getting up there. It's sort of It's not 75% or whatever. It's 94. It's only 6% off 100.
Your maths does not fail you, Des. It's correct. It's close to 100%, but less.
All right, thank you for that, Des. We'll move on now. Well, does anyone else have any questions to ask?
Yeah, I can't see any hands coming up, Tash, so it seems like they are reasonably comfortable. So Des has got another one. Des, you got one more? We haven't got any mic there.
Yeah.
Now you're right. Yep.
Okay. It's just in regards to rate revenue. Is there a way that we can actually, you know, because this is where I think it's 82% of the income comes from rates. Is that correct?
That's what the graph said. Yes.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, you know, is there any way we can sort of increase that rate revenue by encouraging just a few more people to build on these vacant allotments? There seems to be a lot of vacant allotments in the district. And I know one of the ideas is that, you know, you put your rates up on the vacant allotments because there's a higher rate on vacant allotments, and that would encourage people to build it. It doesn't seem to have done so. Probably is actually part of the reason why people don't buy the vacant blocks off the developers, because you've got to pay higher rates, but that's another issue. But I'm just thinking one way, and I've always been pushing this idea to encourage people to move to the district because it's a higher rate base, gives us more income, is to open up some of the community land at the foreshore. Create a park down there, you know, a seaside park, parklands, more open space, and that would include opening up part of the caravan park, and maybe operate a smaller caravan park over the river on that southern side. Just beautify the area. We're putting, you know, create, you know, more open space there. You know, beautify the beach areas, parks, gardens, somewhere for a bus to turn around. I just see that, you know, if you can do those sort of things, because that's what people want. They want nature-based stuff. All the consultation I've seen, we want more nature-based. Even the foreshore consultation, every box where there was nature in it, they ticked it. The development, they said no. So, you know, I think that's what people want down here.
Well, we'll be doing
that sort of stuff. Just a suggestion, and I'll leave it for now. But just
with the foreshore,
don't take that out of part of the idea. You know, I think you can sort of
with the
we could really
foreshore.
make that down there at the beach. We could really make it something, you know. And yes, we'd lose a bit of revenue, but look, we could make it up with a higher rate space. Everyone would come down and sit, you know. And the last comment would be, come and see what they've done at Normanville. You should see that foreshore now. It's an amazing place. And I urge all the councillors and staff to go down there one day and just visualise if that fence wasn't there. You can look across to the hills. You can look to the river. Just go down individually and have a look and just think what we could do with that area, rather than.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us.
All right. So
thank you. If I could, Tash, I might make a comment here. To bring more people into the community is one thing, as long as they're full-time residents. The absentee landowners actually cost us money with a federal assistance grant funding. We are deemed to be wealthy, and they deem the properties to have a value of $235,000 on average, and the state averages, I think, is around about $150,000. So instead of us getting $500,000 a year on our federal grant funding, we get $150,000. And I've worked my butt off in the last 5 years trying to get someone to listen to me in government departments to actually make a change. I sent a letter out this morning to the Premier stating this in a very terse way to try and stimulate a decent conversation to actually get some money. $500,000, we don't have to encourage more people. We won't have to put up rates. We can do a lot with 500 grand a year. Thanks, Tash. Back to you.
Yeah, no problems. If no one else has any questions about the annual business plan and budget, I will bring the meeting to a close and thank everyone for your attendance. We are having 2 further meetings, but they will be a repeat of tonight. So unless you're really into hearing the same thing, I probably wouldn't recommend coming again. Although I do encourage you all to get onto Your Say Yankalilla, and if you haven't been able to text through your feedback tonight, please get in and put a submission in. Like I said before, the stuff you've verbally told us, please put it in writing so it can be reported. What will happen now is the elected members will have time to digest this information. Everything that's put into Your Say or written submissions will be reported to council in our report, and the budget will be decided in June at the council meeting. So again, thank you everyone for your attendance, and we'll bring the meeting to a close.